Perfect. Thanks, Tracy. And good morning, everybody. Hope you had a great long weekend and were able to charge the batteries a little bit. Um, Interesting time right now, and Tracy's asked me to speak about a number of things in sort of different capacities, especially with what's going on right now, everything COVID related. And when we're starting the school year off, we've got our usual things that we want to make sure that we have up and running. But this year, obviously, is unlike no other. And the one thing, sort of the overriding theme right now, is that safety trumps everything. And that's not only coming from you're not going to only hear that at a school-based level, and I'm sure you turn on the news and you hear it all the time. But I mean, from a ministry perspective, from a board perspective, and from an auto public health perspective, things are changing on a daily basis, and some of the things changed just as early as Friday, as late as Friday at the end of the day, which we had to adjust a little bit for this morning. So the wording that I'm often using right now is "at this time" or "as of right now." This is what's an expectation in terms of what the school needs to look like to best ensure everybody's safety. So I'll talk to you about when you walk in the building, and it's a conversation that I had with two of our student teachers from Nipissing this morning. It's very different in terms of what we need to be doing as educators and what the students need to be doing as well. So we never walk in a building without having our mask on. Anytime we're going from class to class, we have to have our shield on. There's some times where we also have to have our gloves on, and we also have to have a gown on. But something that just changed on Friday is that if you're going from more than one class, you're able to put goggles on. So it just sort of gives you an idea of what you're going to be dealing with. So if you're not comfortable with wearing a mask at all times, do the best you can to get a little more comfortable with it, and also the shield as well, because you might very well be asked to do that from the beginning of the day until the very end of the day, when the kids come in as well. So right now, contact tracing is key in ensuring that we minimize contacts from one class to the other and from one zone to the other is always adhered to. So when the kids are coming in the bus in the morning, they're on an assigned seat, and they're assigned according to the family members that are on the bus with them and the different students that are in their class. So we sort of cluster kids on the bus. When they arrive at school, they each have a dot that they must stand on, and it's a numbered dot outside. When they go into the class, they have their assigned seat. When they need to go to the washroom, they have their assigned washrooms that they need to go to. Staff members at our school as well have assigned washrooms. And there are certain doors that they can come in and out of. And you have to sign in and out of every one as well. So in some of the classes, we have QR codes. So you just take your phone, hold it up there, and you have to do that. And the reason for that is, I'm sure you've been watching the news. You can't put the TV on or radio or get on your phone without seeing all the different things that are happening at the different schools right now. But we have to have all of that ready at a moment's notice in terms of contact tracing for auto public health. So if there's a suspected case or there is an actual case at the school, auto public health comes in and they will ask for all of that. You know, what seat are they in the school? Who are they sitting nearby? What washrooms are they using? What kids have signed out to go to the washrooms at those particular times? All of that type of stuff. And it's just, once again, just to best ensure everybody's safety right now. Is it ideal? No. Are we dealing with it? Absolutely, because that's, it's not an option right now. And behind the scenes, there are a lot of things that are going on. But when we're in front of the kids, they need to be immune to all of that stuff that's going on behind the scenes. Are we talking to them about it? Absolutely. Are we discussing why we're doing all these things? Absolutely. But the control chaos that goes on behind the scenes right now is just for staff to be discussing and asking questions and coming up with solutions, always adhering to the guidelines. We never go outside of those boundaries, but sometimes we have to find better ways to make things work within those guidelines, and we're doing it. And I'm going to be honest with you, we talk about this all the time. The kids are really, really resilient. I sometimes question if they're even a little bit more resilient than we are at times, because they're adapting. They're in classes. They're sitting nicely. A lot of them are sitting behind these plexiglass shields as well with our board from kindergarten to grade 3, because masks are optional at that level. We always encourage them to have them, but the kids are doing just fine. They even have their zones outside, we can't have different kids from different classes playing together, but we sort of rotate through. And do we need to get creative once again with the kids? We do, because normally we've got basketballs out there, soccer balls, skipping ropes, all that type of stuff. We're not able to have any of that out there just yet. So, we have books that we have, and I've got one of them right here, and teachers are talking about, well, what can the kids do? So resources are coming out right now, and we have to find those creative solutions to best meet the needs of the kids. And the bottom line too is we need to stay positive throughout this. With whatever else is going on behind the scenes, from the second I get in my car until the second I get back into my car at the end of the day, we stay positive the best we possibly can. And we have to be positive in front of the kids because they look to us. And they sort of, they feel what we're feeling. So if we present a confident front and a positive front, and I mean, we're being realistic at all times as well with them. We tell them why they have to be doing these things, but bottom line is we have to model those things for them. So we also focus on what we can control, and that's creating an environment and an atmosphere that's based on, at our school, 4 pillars right now. We always talk about being respectful at school. We always talk about being safe at school. And that's not only physical safety, but also emotional safety. We always talk about trying our best, and we talk about having fun. And those are things that resonate throughout our school on a daily basis. During the morning announcements, when you go through the classes, we talk about different things. And we find that if we do have a respectful environment and a safe environment, that's going to lead to a positive academic environment. And that's when we see kids flourish. And if you think about that, if kids feel comfortable in the environment they're in, they want to come to school and they have fewer distractions behind the scenes. So when you're teaching them that math class or that language class or that, whatever it is, they're going to be in a better frame of mind, and you're going to see the results from that. We also have to create an environment where we foster social, emotional, and academic growth. We always talk about a growth mindset, and we are going to have little bumps in the road, but we focus on the fact that we can't do that yet. And what are the things that we need to do a little bit differently to achieve our goals? And for us as well, always behind the scenes, even though everything's COVID related right now and safety related, we still have to be talking about strong instructional practices. So when I was walking through the classrooms this morning, I try and get a feel for what's going in all the classrooms a couple of times a day. And when I was going through there today, I always ask the students, what are you learning about? And if it's sort of a good benchmark for me to sort of see, where classes are at and where certain students are at. But it's also, I try to gather all of that information to sort of see as a whole for the school, where are we at and what are some of the things that we need to discuss a little bit further, and what are some areas of growth that we might have. But teachers today were talking in one of the classes, a grade 2 math class, they were talking about a diagnostic that they were doing with their class. So they had something up on the smart board, and the kids were doing an activity, and it had to do with shapes, geometric shapes in class, and they were having that discussion. So she's trying to determine where her students are right now prior to getting into that unit, to see, where does she need to steer the ship, either individually with an individual student, a small group of students, or the class as a whole. And sort of talking about when I'm going in there in the classrooms and when the teachers are in there as well, they're gathering a little bit of data, and that's a little bit of advice that I would give each and every one of you right now. When you're going in the class or in the school, try to gather a little bit of information about the school as a whole, the culture, the demographics, the pulse of the class, the style of the teacher, because you're going to go in there and you're going to want to make some changes, but at the same time, you have to understand that, you're coming into a school that's already up and running, and you're going to have to sort of blend in to a certain degree. And even as an administrator right now, this is my 8th school that I've been at, and every school has a very different flavor to it. Every class has a different flavor to it. You could be going into some schools that might be very affluent. You might be going into some schools that in our board are designated as a raised school, where they need additional support, whether it be for, it could be the economic status sort of the bulk of the families in our area. It could be high transiency, high ESL, poverty, different criteria. So get a feel for what the building is you're going into. And it's important to learn about the culture, like I said, of the class and the school. And I think you're going to be that much more successful with everybody in there as well. Each school has their strengths, and each school has some slightly different needs. And going from one school to the next, you might see that things are similar in some aspects or in different in other areas. But we do have some student teachers that come in, and already they've said, they've already made contact with the teacher. They've already sort of have an idea of what the class makeup is. number of boys, number of girls, number of ESL students, number of students on an IEP, just to sort of get a feel for what you're dealing with, some of the units you're going to be working on while you're there, what some of the things that you're going to be expected to focus on or do while you're in the classroom. Some go on the web pages as well and on the Twitter accounts, just to sort of get an idea of the things that are important to that school, and then see what you can do to further enhance that school culture and climate. The same time, while you're sort of gathering all this information, don't wait too long. Think about how you can make a positive impact from the get-go, and take advantage of each and every opportunity. There's some people that are going to come in and jump right into things right away. And there's some people that are going to be sitting back a little bit, and that's fine. We all have different styles and we all have different ways that we learn. But you don't want to be a wallflower for too long. You want to take those opportunities to get up and walk around. And even if the teacher is teaching at the front or working with a small group of kids on the side, ask, am I able to walk around and help some students, or do you want me to work with one or two students in particular? And I think you're going to benefit from the experience that much more. I always talk about trying to get involved in things outside of the classroom. Unfortunately, right now, with everything that's going on, we know that there are no extracurricular activities or anything along those lines. But things might change in the next, I don't think, by the time you're done your first practicum, but all the way down to, phys ed equipment. We're hearing that this week we should be getting a little more direction on what we're able to do. So even when you're out at recess on a duty, for example, think about what you're allowed to do and what you can do to help the kids out, because they need us. A lot of times they're very resilient. They're out there. They can figure out games to play on their own. But that was a conversation I was having with a parent today, because a couple of the kids were having difficulty at recess, and it's that that all the things that they were used to doing in the past they're not able to do right now. So it's our responsibility to help them out and find new things for them to do. Some of the things that I've picked up, I've been fortunate to be with this board. This is my 26th year right now. I was a teacher for 10 years, and I've been an administrator for the balance of that. And a few of the things that have really resonated with me from some people along the ways. I still remember one of the professors that I had, and for my qualifications program, and he could not have been more true with this. And he said, I'm going to be teaching about legislation, policies, procedures, budget, all that type of stuff, staffing. But he said, I want you to remember two things that when you're going into that role, and I think it would apply to any role in the school, because we're always in front of people throughout the course of the day. And he said, if you remember these two things, those are the two most important things. The first one is fostering. 80% of our job has to do with the relationships that we foster with people, those interpersonal relationships. And this person was bang on with that. This job is all about establishing a rapport with our students, a professional rapport, obviously, with our students. You can be friendly with them, but you can never be their friend. But really with parents, with your colleagues, all that type of stuff, the better you understand them and the better they understand you, I think the more successful you're going to be in having these children grow socially, emotionally, and academically. Often learning about a child, why they're doing well in a class, and asking them, hey, what did you do that you were successful or that led to this success right now? Or when a child's having a difficult day, we need to figure out what the underlying factors are, what their lagging skills are. So they might be having a difficult day because they didn't eat this morning. They may have a difficult day because something is going on at home right now. And some of that stuff they might want to share with you, and some of that stuff they might never want to share with you. And you're going to have to respect that and honor that. But at the same time, if you have a better idea of where the child is coming from, or where your entire class is coming from, the things that are important to them, the types of activities they do, what does it look like at home, and it's just having those conversations with the kids. You're going to learn about them, they're going to learn about you. I think you're going to enjoy your job more, because you're going to see a greater success from the kids. And it's always thrilling and it's always exciting, and you're always proud when you see a child get something academic that they may have struggled with. At the same time, it's just as rewarding when you see a child that may have been having difficulty or not hanging out with some friends, and then all of a sudden they're just happier at school because they're getting along better with their friends, and you've helped to nurture that either overtly or behind the scenes a little bit. That's, I think, why all of us get into this job, is to help people out in one way or another. The other thing that he said, and you take this with a grain of sand, but he said, stay away from toxic people. I think it's so important to have a positive environment in your classroom. I think it's so important to have a positive environment for the school as a whole, and not only in the school within the four walls, but also with the community, because we work closely with parents on a regular basis and also different organizations. So we need to be positive. There are things that we could talk about, and complain about every day, all day. But is that the type of environment that you want to foster? Is that the type of environment that you want to be a part of? And is that the type of environment you want to fuel? Um, and that's something for me that, when I'm walking around the school, I'm just trying to get a vibe as to how are people doing? Are they having a good day? And 99% of the time they are. And if they're not having a good day, what is it that we can do to help them out a little bit right now? And that's not only in front of the kids, that always has to be in front of the kids, that we need to be positive, but also when you're sitting in a staff room, you need to make sure you have a positive tone in there, and what you're talking about is a positive tone. And don't think for a second that we don't all have bad days. And I'll tell people, come on in my office, let's close the door and, spill your guts, the good, the bad, the ugly. But when that door opens back up and we go back out there, we're going to have our game face on, and we're going to, be positive about things. Another thing too that a previous principal of mine taught me that really stuck with me is, she said, this job is never linear sequential. And it's so true. You never know how your day is going to go. You're going to be extremely organized, and you need to be in this job. Don't think for a second you can, I don't want to say get away with, but you need to be focused. You need to know where you're going with stuff, whether it be short-term, long-term. And I'm not just talking about long-range plans, for example. In our board this year, because of the online schooling and the in-person schooling, we all have to have the same long-range plans that are happening, but you need to know where you're going with your kids. You need to have a good read on your kids and their strengths and their needs. But at the same time, as organized as you are, you better be ready to roll with the punches, because things happen in a moment's notice, and you have to be ready to adjust. And you've always got people there to help you out. And there's always a way to sort of get over this, that disruption. And it could be a 2-minute disruption, or it could be an hour-long disruption, and you just sort of adjust accordingly. Another thing too, that an expression that I've heard a few times, is you have to check your ego at the door. You're all going to be coming in with a strong skill set. You wouldn't be in this program right now, and you wouldn't want to be going into this line of work if you didn't have a strong skill set. And I want you to think that when you're going in there, you definitely have something to offer. But we always, I'm the first to say, I check my ego at the door, and if something's not going well, I'm gonna listen to what other people have to say, and we're gonna find a creative solution. So it's always good to get input from the stakeholders around the table to see what is it that we can do just a little bit better to tweak things so that these things don't happen again in the future. And something that I'm gonna actually, when I'm off this chat with you in the next little bit, I'm going to be staffing an educational assistant position, because one of our EAs went from a term, so kind of like a long-term occasional role for an occasional teacher, but she got a permanent contract. So bittersweet, we're thrilled that she got the contract that she deserved at another school, unfortunately, which means that we have to staff. So I'm going to be looking at, obviously, the criteria it takes for that person coming in to be able to do an effective job in front of the kids. The other thing I'm going to be focusing on, though, as well, is the soft skills. So some of the questions that I have in there, they're not specifically, related to soft skills, but the whole notion of soft skills are embedded in some of these questions. So if you come into a school and you're going to be, relatively new to the profession, I mean, some of you have more experience than others working with children in different capacities. But, for example, a new initiative that came out last year was Math Up, and it's a great resource. And some people, their teaching styles lends well to using that resource. And for some people, it was a more challenging thing, because although they've been teaching math for a number of years, the way to navigate through this program was a little bit different than what they were normally accustomed to. Bottom line is, we can teach you how to use Math Up, for example. And I'm just using that as this example. We can mentor you. We can send you on, I know we don't send people on PD right now because everything's in-house and done virtually, but there are always ways to get you more proficient and more comfortable with using that resource. The things that we can't necessarily teach are being resilient. And I can't tell you how important resiliency is in this profession. Teamwork. I mean, we can't do this job without leaning on each other in one capacity or another. So problem solving, I know some people might love when I say this, and some people might drive them nuts when I say this, but there's always a solution to every problem, and we have to look at things through a solutions-based lens. And we need the people that are just going to take that initiative to be a problem solver from the get-go. And you're going to bounce ideas off somebody, and we'd expect you to, but we have to find a way to solve that problem. Being a positive person. I mean, you think about somebody in your life right now that's positive, and you want to be around them, and it's infectious. So when you come into the school, be that person. And like I said, always adopting that solutions-based approach. So I don't know if I'm past my 10 or 20 minutes here, but when you're coming into the profession right now, that it's a little bit different right now. But I'm also thinking that in some ways, this might be the best way to come into the profession, because you're coming in where not only are you focusing on the teaching, you're focusing on learning about the students and the culture of the building, and trying to get as many experiences as you can in front of the kids and with the kids right now, and learning from your associate teachers and the other people in the building. But when you prove to yourself that you're able to handle this situation, it's going to be smooth sailing from here on in. I think you'll be able to handle anything. Okay.
So thank you very much, Jeremy. We'll just pause for now. I know that there will be some questions. I know Sean is online as well, so I'll give Sean a little bit of time, and then we can then we can open up for questions. This recording, as I've just got a question here, there will be a link to the presentation on Brightspace so that people can go back and sort of listen to your words of wisdom, because you've definitely given us lots to think about. So Sean, maybe if you can jump in right now, and we'll welcome you. Sean Kelly is a principal in the Ottawa Catholic School Board, one of the largest high schools in the area. He works in one of the largest high schools, and we welcome you, Sean.
That's great, Tracy. Thank you. Usually it's Harrison Ford playing me in videos and recordings, so unfortunately he's not available for this, so you have to deal with me. Tracy, I appreciate the introduction, and Jeremy, it was great hearing some of the information that you shared, and looking forward to any questions that the group has. Tracy's been great. I've been working with Tracy for a number of years now. Certainly our student teachers are a group that I have a lot of time for. I spend a bit of time with them every year in terms of providing some orientation to the schools that I've been at. I work hard encouraging our staff to take on student teachers, because I think it's such a valuable activity. And I remember my time in Teachers College like it was yesterday, although it was very long ago. But those experiences, I know, were so profound as you move through that. And even from class to class, I remember the learning that I was involved with, not only with the kids, but just in my own understanding of what this job was going to be like. And as much as you're going to hear some perspectives on the job this morning, know that that is going to absolutely evolve. And I am certainly in no shape, way, or form finished in terms of where I am. And I feel my focus on learning has even increased more as I've gotten older and worked in different positions, including administration now, where I realize the value in working with others and learning from them. And that has really shaped where I see where we need to be at this point in time. So a little bit of background. I did begin as an educational assistant once upon a time in the system, and did my teacher education at York University and studied primary junior until I realized that was way too much work, and decided that my calling was more to the intermediate and high school classes. And I did teach approximately 10 years at those levels. Loved my time in grades 7 and 8. And I think this is certainly my story has been one of maybe I could say laziness, in that I was there was never a strong interest of mine to be looking at administration at all, and even change within different schools. I've been to 7 different schools. I was at 2 different schools as a teacher, and I always felt that I was very complete and happy where I was. So it was more an accident that I moved along, especially administration. I enjoyed my 7 and 8 time. Marissa Perry, this is nice. I'm generally going to run into definitely people that I've passed along the way. So that's great if you can let me know. But enjoyed the classroom, loved grade 7 and 8. I had an opportunity. I was approached about doing high school, and it was with a little bit of regret because I loved the 7-8 experience, but got into high school and really enjoyed that. And then I had a friend of mine bully me into administration at one point in time, and I really had no interest at the time to do it. But doing some of the courses and getting involved, I realized that it seemed to be a bit of a natural route for me in terms of looking for further growth as I move along. So be open to those experiences, and do it for the learning that comes from those different experiences. And if I can give you just a taste of a bit of a direction this morning, I would say you need to develop as a teacher that is going to be working with kids, working with parents, working with other staff members. You need to develop a philosophy. And I would say it's not a philosophy of education, but rather a classroom philosophy of education. And this isn't something I walked into my first teaching job with. It's certainly something that developed over time. And I have to tell you, I came in at a time where teaching was a very traditional role. Generally, the expectation was everybody had their textbook in your class and we were going through to a certain page. I just knew that that's not how I wanted to do it. And I then realized I really needed to formulate a direction if I was going to do something different. And I needed to come up with a direction because I had to work through it. I had to decide, does this make sense? Is it going to make sense to kids? And I think what you need to do is just start with that. What do you want your classroom environment to look like? And I've never gone wrong where I begin with developing goals, not for students, but with students, and deciding what is the most important thing that we can do together. And I've certainly heard different philosophies, if you will, along the way, people indicating that we're getting students ready for the real world. Well, I'd hate to tell students that they aren't part of the real world right now. I think that's a little demeaning to them. So I never ascribe to that. The idea that we're simply preparing kids for university, and we've got to have these certain expectations because if we don't, we're going to fail them because they won't be ready for university. And I have to say again, that wasn't something that I really ascribe to. I think that's a component of our responsibility in terms of preparing students for what they will be doing after high school, whether that's university or college or the world of work, apprenticeship learning. But it certainly wasn't the driving force. And if I can tell you where I ended up, I would say, in my mind, education is about giving kids the opportunity to learn what they are capable of. And I would say that encompasses a great deal, but it's also simple enough that we don't feel we have to race to an end because it's that tangible. It's something that we work through, and it's not just my job as the grade 7 teacher or the grade 11 teacher. It's got to be progressive, and I think we all have to instill an opportunity for kids to learn what they're capable of. And through that, there's going to be failure, there's going to be frustration, but I think if that has served me well, in terms of going through that. And there was some confliction at the time when I started out. I remember the NDP government at the time had come up with this transitions program where every student would continue to write a test until they achieve mastery, or 80% of the time. I thought, well, what kind of sense does that make? It's like cheating if you get to keep writing these tests over and over again. But then when I had developed what would become this direction, I realized, well, if we're able to provide them with a learning opportunity that brings them closer to that, then that started to make sense to me in terms of what I wanted to accomplish. So if you're looking at that as the goal and that as what you want to do, and it could be certainly a variation of that, and I'm not saying everybody has to approach it that way, but then I'd want to know, how do we begin that? How do we move students towards that? And I think the idea is very basically you have to start with kids in that right frame of mind. And they have to be supported in terms of their mental health, supported in terms of their academics, whether they're a student who requires an IEP, supported socially. So all of that needs to happen, because we're learning that if that's not available, if that's not the frame of mind that students approach the work with, they're not going to find out what they're capable of, because they aren't working at a point where they can learn what they're capable of. They can be stuck in certain areas. So it's about starting off with that. And if there are issues, knowing that it's up to you, you have a responsibility to help those students reach out, not to necessarily solve those problems, but to direct them to the resources they may need to get the support that's going to help them out. And I think you start with a template for how you're doing this. And as I said, the early template was very simple. It was open up the textbook. Samir, you read the first 3 paragraphs, and then we'll switch over to Julie. We'll get through that. Any questions? Great. Let's go to the chapter questions at the end of that particular passage. And I think that was a very comfortable expectation, that's how we approach the learning. But certainly our board, it's not a secret, the work of Michael Fullen, but our school board, the Ottawa Catholic School Board, has adopted the deep learning model as a template from which we can allow kids to recognize what they are capable of. And I won't get into that whole philosophy, but all to say there are areas within that that includes learning partnerships, leveraging technology, pedagogical practices that need to come together for the learning to happen. And then our assessment of students and how we determine whether they're meeting our expectations is that we measure them according to certain competencies. And that whole package of deep learning is a great way. I lost my light in here. I've got to make some motion here. It'll catch me shortly, hopefully. But the idea is that we've got a template that we can be familiar with, that we can explain to kids so that they know how we're navigating that along. And then how does it look like in the class? And what I'd suggest is that it's got to be student driven. This can't be something, and it hasn't been that long since the expectation strongly was it was the teacher in front who was making all of those decisions. But if this is about a student finding out what they're capable of, they need to be directing some of that learning, whether it's a choice in an assignment, a particular area of interest that they have, a career aspiration that they can integrate into the learning that's going on, that you need to start with that. You need to have a bigger purpose as a teacher in the classroom in terms of what that learning experience is going to be. And I can provide you with just a couple of quick examples where last year we were involved with a religion class, and they had reached out to an organization about fundraising. And I got involved. I told them that's my favorite thing to do is call me into the class, let me know what I can do to support the learning. And sometimes I come with some money as well to help some of these initiatives. And I was happy to work with some kids, and this got bigger. They got in touch with the media and the organization to see exactly what was needed. They got onto social media and were sharing their messaging out. And it was great to see them starting off with that idea and developing it. I actually have a few grade 8 classes this year that have been interested in analyzing our COVID precautions here at the school. They've looked at what we're doing and kind of put our work under the microscope, which I'm fine with. They brought me into the class and explained what some of their concerns were with what we were doing, and expecting that I would just then take that away and go solve them somehow. But I turned it around and put it on them, and I said, what are your suggestions in these cases? They were invested not only in identifying the issues, but then coming up with solutions. And just to see the excitement of kids that are being listened to, and having them work together as students, learning from each other, knowing that sometimes there's limitations with what we can do, but being practical about that and moving on. So a lot of that has to do with that direction. And in terms of how that comes out, how do we express that this is our philosophy of classroom education? Well, I'm very clear with my goals as the principal. I have them labeled outside my office, and I'm about working with student and staff learning. I'm working with establishing community, which is focused on issues such as anti-racism and equity and diversity, and then sharing the good news that's happening at my high school with other partners in the community. I want students to know what my goals are, just so that they realize how they need to articulate their own. And the idea is that we are dealing with a very strange time right now in terms of the pandemic and how that's driven us into certain directions. But when you've established a philosophy of moving forward, you can step back and rely on that and continue to use that and not be overtaken by the change that's happened around you. So it serves you well to establish that. Certainly another thing I would suggest if you're writing things down in terms of approaches is you've got to bring humor to the position, whether that's working with parents, staff, students. It may becomes overly natural to me. I sometimes have to rein it back in by times, but knowing, and Jeremy talked a little bit about this, he mentioned relationships, knowing how important it is to get to know kids. And I use this philosophy now as an administrator, but it certainly served me well as a teacher. And my thought is that you are running for office every day. Every day you're campaigning, you're trying to bring forward what's important, and you have to ask yourself at the end of the day, would I get elected? Certainly we're in that election mode right now with what's going on in the United States, but it's just one of those things that you can keep in the back of your mind. And would I be elected for the right reasons? Because you need to make that kind of impact on your students, the parents, your colleagues, that you could ask that of yourself, and hopefully you're answering on the many good days you're going to have that, yeah, I think they would elect me. So I leave that with you. I'm anxious for some questions as well. And Tracy, I'll turn it back over to you.
So thank you very much, Sean. So we're opening up for some questions at this point. You can either write the question in the chat, or I can you can raise your hand and we can ask that type of thing. So just to get my back to my sharing. There was a question, and maybe Jeremy, I'll ask you this. It has to do with the type of, I guess, personal protective equipment that might be used in a classroom. You noticed, you sort of gave some suggestions of what teachers are often wearing. Does it depend on the subject or the division in which they're teaching?
So yes and yes.
Okay.
Depending on what you're doing and what grade level you're at will determine what you need to be wearing. And we supply everything. So teachers cannot come in, any staff member, sorry, cannot come in with their own masks. They have to have the medical grade ones that are supplied by the board. We'll make sure that you have those. If you are working with more than one group during the day, then you have to have either the goggles on, CSA approved goggles, or the shield. Once again, we don't supply teachers or staff members with goggles, but we do have shields here that we're able to give you. And then if somebody's in an isolation room, for example, they have more stuff, but we don't expect anybody to be in there. Depending on what grade levels you have as well. So kindergarten staff, because they're more up close and personal with the students, they always have to have a shield on. And when you're out at recess, you don't necessarily have to have the shield on. So there are certain times where you do and do not have to have different PPE on, and we'll explain that to everybody when we get there.
Just to follow up on that, what did you mean by lagging skills?
Yes, I saw that in there. There's a great book that I read a number of years ago called Lost at School. So whenever there's something going on with a child, we need to get to the underlying factors as to why they're dealing with a situation in that way. And quite often there might be a lagging skill in there. So it's something that the others, we've all got lagging skills to a certain degree, each and every one of us. But really it just comes down to scratching the surface to figure out what it is that they're having difficulty with and what can we do to build that skill in them. It might be a resiliency thing. It might be a self-confidence thing. And it's manifesting itself in one way, but really when you figure out what the underlying factor is, then you're able to help that child cope better and deal with, any and all situations.
Thank you. Nicholas, I see you have your hand up. So we can hear you, Nicholas. Do you have a question?
No, it unmuted, sorry.
Okay. Are you okay? So I just want to clarify that yes, teacher candidates are receiving the equipment that they need from the board. Again, that consistency, as Jeremy mentioned. Sean, maybe you can sort of mention about the protective equipment that you have in your school.
Yeah, very similar to what Jeremy's got. We have all of those options for teachers. Some are optional, and in our school board, the visor is encouraged, but it's not mandatory. But we are providing masks to all staff, support staff that would be working, student teachers that are coming in. And certainly to students who have forgotten them as well as they come into the building when they enter. So that's all available. We do have special packaging in our isolation room. If we do have to take a student who is ill, we do have to suit up with the actual the cover up with the visor and the mask so that we're protected there. And some of our, again, support staff, educational assistants, have some heightened materials as well to protect them when they're working in close proximity with students.
Thank you. So there's a question in the chat about how common or easy is it for principals to transition back into teaching in the classroom if, for example, you decided the classroom was where you want to be. I'm not sure if either one of you would want to be going back to the classroom, but if you did, how easy would that be?
I'll start, Sean, and then if you want to jump in right after. I'm going to be honest with you, there are a lot of days where I really miss being closer with the students. I loved being a homeroom teacher for the 10 years I did that. And I was mainly, Sean, you mentioned 7s and 8s. That's where the bulk of my teaching was, but all the way down into the primary levels as well. You don't have the same connection with the kids on an individual basis, but at the same time, the flip side is you have connections with all of the kids to a certain degree. To be perfectly honest with you, though, if I wanted to go back into teaching right now, I'd have to go back and apply to be on an occasional teacher list. And if I were successful there, then I would eventually get into an LTO and then eventually get into a homeroom teacher role, but it would take a number of years. So I think what they do is they give us, I don't know if this is still in print somewhere right now, but I know they gave us, I think, 1 year to make a decision. Is this something you want to do long term, or if you want to go back to the classroom, there's that sort of one opportunity. So I'm in it for the long haul now, but I love what I do. So, it's not something people necessarily want to jump into right away, because it's something that you then are committing to for the balance, like in all likelihood, the balance of your career. Both are great though.
Yeah, I don't say this very frequently because my colleagues often get upset with me, but I've always maintained that as vice principals and even as principals, that there should be a teaching component to our jobs. We've all heard the indication that principal is not a noun, it's an adjective. It's supposed to be the principal teacher, and it's very hard to demonstrate that when you aren't teaching. But I have certainly tried to maintain that teacher part of me as much as possible. And as I alluded to when I was speaking earlier, my favorite thing is to get into classrooms and let me be your project manager. Let me take some of those roles on. And that's how I'm running for office. The idea that you can get into a class, work with kids still. It's not always practical, especially these days with some of the expectations that Jeremy and I deal with as administrators related to self-isolation and students identified on lists that aren't able to come to school. There's a lot going on. You do have to make time for it. But I would say it's not about going the other way, going back. It's about continuing what you were good at in the classroom and bringing that to your role. And I've taught the principal qualification program for a number of years. I'm just retired from that this year. I did it for a number of years, and my definition for those teachers who are in that principal qualification program, my definition of leadership, you're not missing anything. A good leader, administrator at a school is a good classroom educator. And I've always maintained that. I believe that that's what makes good administrators. There's some other things you have to get good at, like signing your name on a bunch of things, but really it's about being a good classroom educator. And if you can do that in the class and you've got an interest to bring that to a different perspective, that's what administration is. So I never felt I missed anything that I needed to go back to. It's about bringing that forward into the role that you have now.
Just to add to what you're saying, Sean, I think it just comes down to it's sort of on a more macro level instead of a more micro level. But you absolutely need everybody's input, all stakeholders.
And I would imagine in this time and age, you're doing everything from bus duty to talking on the phone to parents to doing all the other types of work. You're filling in where you're needed in order to be able to best meet the needs of your students. So I can imagine that. There's a question about, actually, Benjamin, do you want to ask your question first? I see your hand is up.
Hi, yes, thanks. I just had a question. Jeremy mentioned not being like a wallflower, like actually getting involved once you know the philosophy of the classroom in the school. But as teacher candidates, we've been recommended to try to make connections in the classroom and within the school. Is there any way that just somebody who has gone through this whole process, somebody who's in administration, that there's certain people we should try to make connections with in order to like better our careers options, something along the lines of that.
Well, the long-standing pecking order in the schools, I think, are your office administrator and your chief custodian, and then we sort of fall into the mix somewhere in there. But no, I really think that and I think Sean's alluded to this a couple of times already in this conversation, is that everybody has something to offer, and you learn so much from everybody. I mean, and I. You know, it doesn't matter. I think it doesn't matter what title somebody might officially have within the building, but everybody has different experiences that they bring to the table. They have different perspectives on things, and I think the more you can get from everybody, the better you're going to be for your students, and the better educator you're going to be. If I've answered your question properly.
So there is a question about if you've noticed any feedback from, I guess, from teachers on the idea of their vocal health. They're speaking behind masks all day. Are they finding that strange? I guess the question would be, are they finding it strenuous, or is there concern about their vocal health?
I haven't heard anything specific to that. Really, everybody in the building has been good, and I encourage them to voice the concerns that they have. I think that's probably one on a list of 25 or 30 that has come up because of some of the changes that are going on right now. But it's something I think people have adjusted to. There's other things that we've pushed teachers into a situation where they've had to adjust this year. We've got students who have decided they want to continue working at home, even though they remain part of the class. So teachers, they're not teaching online to these individuals in the evening, but they do have a responsibility to report, assess, and evaluate these students. So the job has really changed. That vocal concern is certainly something that is probably on that list, but there's a lot going on that people are having to deal with, and sometimes it's individual, and I can see individual teachers having difficulty with some of those things, and certainly we're troubleshooting what we can around some of those issues, but there's many that we're dealing with.
And just to add to what you're saying, Sean, I mean, in our roles, the two things that I always say I'm going to be black and white on is safety and liability. And it's to protect everybody, obviously, and to protect the staff too, in terms of a potential, liable situation. If these are what the board is telling us we are mandated to wear, then we must wear them. And do we need to sometimes come up with a creative solution to make it work? We will. For example, I know some teachers have purchased, or depending, they've gone through maybe an employee wellness situation where they need a little microphone, so a little headset or something along those lines. So we'll always try to find a way, and it's not uncommon for staff to come to us and say, this is a situation I'm dealing with, here's a potential solution, or what do you think we could be doing or should be doing, and we're going to work something out. So but we actually tested it, so we had everybody stand. We had 20 staff members standing a meter apart and putting this thing on and actually testing to see how well our voices would project and what problems we'd have. And did it take a little getting used to? Absolutely. But it's not an option, so we have to find a creative solution.
So one of the other questions is, what's the most important skill for a teacher candidate to demonstrate? My opinion is adaptability, but I'm not sure if that's your opinion.
Sean, you want to start with that one?
Yeah, I would say your interest in the kids that are in front of you. You could answer this a bunch of different ways, but if you are interested in those kids in front of you, finding out what they are able to demonstrate, what they're capable of, that's your job. There's a lot of other stuff that surrounds that, as I think you could recognize, but I would say some of the individuals I've had to sit down and have discussions with, because things might need some improvement, that's what's missing for me, is that somebody might get caught up in another part of the job, or they're worried about how they're going to be perceived in terms of marks or things like that. I find it really difficult when I can walk into a classroom and see an engaged group of individuals enjoying their time, a teacher at the front of the class also engaged, enjoying their time. Everything else seems to fall into line there. It's that relationship that you establish with that class where it's non-threatening. Kids will take chances. They're not afraid of failing because they see that you are genuinely interested. I would say that's where you need to start.
Yeah, and if we could just add to that and echo what you're saying, Sean, I agree 100%. The teachers, I think, that have the greatest impact, or educators have the greatest impact on their students, short-term and long-term, are the ones that create that atmosphere and that environment, that safe and caring environment, that fun environment that's conducive to learning. I think, and you can see that going into each and every classroom. And different people have different styles on how they're going to make that happen. And one isn't necessarily better than the other. You need a variety of teaching styles and whatnot on a staff. I think if you have all the same type of people on staff, and that's a responsibility. I think our greatest responsibility is hiring the best people to be in front of the kids. And if they can do exactly what Sean said, you're going to have you're going to have kids that want to come to school every day. And I think one of the greatest compliments I ever heard is we with our school, it's more difficult for the families to come to us. So quite often we have to go to them. So we go to one of the apartment buildings at one of our schools. The greatest number of our students come from these two apartment buildings, inner city right now. And we were sitting around the table there with the parents, and we were talking to them about some of the things that we're doing at school, and they were telling us some of the things that are going well or some of the things they would like us to work on. And one of the parents said, "We love what your teachers and your staff are doing right now. And a consequence that we try and tell our kids," and I know they're joking about this, but they said, "If you don't toe the line at home, we're not going to let you go to school." And when we heard that, we thought, okay, we're doing something right here. We're far from perfect, but that was one of the nicest compliments I think that a parent could have paid us.
So there is a question, Jeremy, if you can let people see what you got behind you on your wall.
We're trying to, sure, we'll move over. So I think it keeps coming back to the relationship building with your students. And I think if they know that you're there for them and, through the good, the bad, the ugly, I think, they're going to buy, I don't even want to use the word buy into the place, but what we try to do, and many schools do this, is promote all of the things that might not necessarily be in, your math class or your language arts class, although there are always those teachable moments. But we have a number of things up around the school that, one of them just down the hallway says, "In a world where you can be anything, be kind." And another one that's just outside the office, right beside the big welcome sign, we have, "Today is a good day to have a good day." So if we can build that and you create that atmosphere in your classroom, you create that atmosphere for your class. Every one of my schools I've been to, we're the best school in the city of Ottawa because of all the great things that we do. And Sean, you talked about running for election. I would vote for you, just what you said here. I'm sure you've got the best school in the city of Ottawa, but if if you believe it, you'll achieve it. And I think if you come across with that positive mindset on a regular basis, and everybody else buys into that, it's infectious, and people want to come to the building on a daily basis.
So with that in mind, I think I'll end today. There are a couple of questions that are sort of very much related to the university and our practicum office, and maybe the two of you could stay on and just sort of know what we're sort of saying. So what we're doing in terms of placement is you will be placed with an associate teacher. Your associate teacher may have a varied work schedule. It may not be solely online or virtual. It may not be solely face-to-face. It may be a combination, and it may change over time. So understanding that you're working with an associate teacher with their with their schedule, and how that looks will play out over the year in different ways. And also just sort of think about the fact that you are in practicum until the end of April. So you're there for a long time. It's sort of bits of time broken up, but you are there until the end of April. So that's one question. The second question is, when practicums, when a COVID test is done or a need for isolation with regard to COVID, you will just continue to stay in that same placement. You might be supporting your associate teacher online. You might have a variety of things, but you are following along with that student. You are that classroom. You're not going to be switched to a different placement, because the adaptability that's required at this time is to understand that the system is constantly evolving and working in those situations. So I just wanted to make sure that we sort of had a little bit of a closing with regards to, practicums coming up. People are worried. We'll have lots more discussion about this as time goes on. Jeremy and Sean, I want to really thank you very much for your honesty, your positiveness, and sort of the need for us to think about the students that we have to serve, that we not have to serve, that we choose to serve. We're public servants. Those kids are the most important. As a teacher, I step back from my own needs, because the needs of my students come first. And that's what we're hoping, that our candidates, when they come into your schools, that they're able to belong to the school community, that they can contribute, and that the bottom line is that the children in your school or the youth in your schools are respected, cared for, and provided the very best education. The two of you are models for administrators, and it was an honor to have you here today. If we have other questions as time goes on, please don't hesitate to let me know. And thank you very, very much.
It was our pleasure, and we wish you all the best in your practicum.
Happy to be here, Tracy. Happy to speak with the group. It's always more fun when there's a bit more interaction, but I did indicate if there's any questions. I know there was some practical issues people had raised, but in terms of transition from primary, junior to high school, if you wouldn't mind putting some questions together, I'd be happy to provide some answers to the group as well.
I definitely will do that. I'll answer to the best of my ability, but I'll also pass them on to you. So again, thank you, thank you, thank you. I look forward to seeing both of you in person sometime this year, but we'll have to make do with what we've got right now. Take care.
That's great. Thanks, Tracy.